Let's go on a crusade for the Holy Grail. Let's get into it. Welcome back to my channel. And the movie we're going to discuss today is Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. I did Raiders of the Lost Ark several months ago along with Temple of Doom. I'm finally getting around to this. I watched it last night. My son actually watched it with me. This film came out May 24th of 1989. I remember that summer I was 10 years old, and there's only two movies I really wanted to see that summer. Ghostbusters 2 and Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, because up to that point I'd already seen Raiders and I saw Temple of Doom many times, and I wanted to see this movie that summer, and my parents took me to the movies to see it. This movie's 2 hours and 7 minutes long. It's PG-13. Had a budget of $48 million, and upon release that summer, made $197 in this country and $474 million worldwide. It was a huge hit. This movie was directed by Steven Spielberg. Obviously, George Lucas produced this film, and we have Harrison Ford back as Indiana Jones. We have Sean Connery as Professor Henry Jones Sr. Denholm Elliott is Marcus Brody in a kind of expanded role compared to the first film. John Rhys Davis is back as Saul, a welcome return because I love that character. River Phoenix is young Indiana Jones, and the reason he was hired was because Harrison Ford had worked with River Phoenix, and he thought he'd be perfect for it before this film. And Steven Spielberg took a look at it and hired him immediately for the role. And we have Julian Glover as Donovan, our main bad guy, kind of. The Nazis are back as our main bad guy as well, but he's kind of facilitates a lot of these things, so he's our main bad guy. And speaking of River Phoenix, that's where we start this film. We see young Indiana Jones in Monument Valley with his Cub Scout or his Boy Scout troop, and they're going out into the desert, and him and his other kid come across this cave, and they go inside, and they see these people, these guys in this hole, and they found the Golden Cross of Cortez, sorry, can't talk. And Indy realizes they just want it for the money, so he wants to sneak it out of there. He sends the other kid back to find their Boy Scout troop leader, and to get the cops. So he sneaks down the ladder, gets the cross as they have their backs turned to him, and he starts going back up, and he makes a noise, and they see him. And this is our first chase. We see Indy going across the desert on his horse. He gets on this train. They follow him, and we see him go into a snake pit. It's a car with all snakes in it. A rhino almost gets him, and he's in another train car with a lion, and we get to see where he gets his cut on his chin. His first time using a whip, and he cuts his chin right here, so we get to see where Indy got that. And then he escapes from these guys and makes it home. We don't see Sean Connery yet, but we hear his voice. He has a conversation with his father, and his father kind of blows him off a little bit. And Indy sees the sheriff pull up, so he goes out, and the men are with the sheriff. And the sheriff goes, "You're lucky, boy, you still have that cross, because if you hand it over now, the gentleman who this cross belongs to will not press charges." So he gives the cross. He doesn't want to do it, but he gives the cross back. And the main guy, who has a fedora on, who looks a lot like Indiana Jones later, tells Indy something to the effect of, "You lost today, kid, but that doesn't mean you have to like it." And he takes his fedora off his head and puts it on young Indy's head. And then we cut to present day for the movie, and it's Indiana Jones on this ship in the middle of the ocean. He raises his head up, and it's a nice transition. And Indiana Jones, there's an action scene on the boat. Indiana Jones escapes, and he makes it back to college with the Cross of Cortez. He gets it back from the same guy who got it off him all those many years ago when he was younger. And him and Marcus have a conversation, and this is when he gets called away to meet with Donovan, and he tells him about the Grail, that he's been facilitating a search for the Grail, and that his father has disappeared in Venice somewhere. And he'd like Indiana Jones to follow his father's footsteps, find his father, and find the Grail. Well, Brody decides to go with him, so they get to Venice. They meet Elsa, who was working with his father, and they go to this old church that was converted into a library, and they retrace his father's last steps before he was taken. And they end up in these underground tunnels, and they find the knight that was tasked with protecting the Grail, and these other guys are after him. This is where we get our famous boat chase scene through the canals of Venice. Now, doing a little research, the city of Venice allowed them full control of the main canal from 7 a.m. to 1 p.m. for one day. So they filmed all that stuff in one day, and it's spectacular. Spielberg is a master at filming an action sequence. And it's all exciting, and Harrison Ford's awesome. As we know, he does most of his own stunts. And then he finds out where his father is. He's being held in a castle by the Nazis. So he ends up going to the castle, and this is where he gets screwed over by Elsa. She's working with the Nazis, and Donovan shows up. He's turned on Indy too. He's been working with the Nazis this whole time to get the Grail. because Hitler wants it. And he gets his father and they escape after some thrilling set pieces. And then we have the scene on Hindenburg, and we get to learn about Indy and his father's relationship. They haven't spoken in a long time. Indy never felt his father gave him the attention he wanted. His dad explains, I gave you your privacy. I let you become your own man. And you get to learn a little bit. In between these awesome action set pieces, we get to learn about the relationship, what happened to Indiana Jones's mother. We find out that she passed away from an illness that she didn't tell his father about till it was too late. So there was nice little touches in between. There's action scene after action scene for sure, and we stop long enough to get to learn about the relationship, why it's a little bit contentious, why Indiana Jones doesn't want him to call him Junior, because we find out Indiana Jones' real name is Henry Jones Jr., and his father calls him Junior for a long part of the movie. And at the end, which we'll get into in a minute, we find out where his name Indiana came from. And then basically, I'm going to fast forward through a little bit. Sala, Marcus, Indy, and his dad arrive at this temple in the middle of the Jordan Desert. And they go in, and the Nazis beat them there. And there's 3 tests to get to the Grail. And all these guys have failed so far. And Donovan shoots Indy's dad to force him to be able to go through the 3 tests of faith to find the Grail. And that's the only thing that'll save his father. So Indy goes. And Indy successfully navigates the 3 tests, and he makes it to this room with all these grails, all these cups of Christ throughout this room, and an old knight that was tasked to protect it. Now he's so old he can't do anything. And Donovan comes in with Elsa, and he picks a cup that he thinks would be the cup of Christ. Or actually, he has Elsa pick it for him, and he drinks out of it, and a cool effect scene with him aging right in front of everybody, and he basically ages into nothing. He just in a dust right in front of him. And then Indy just selects one, and it's not a fancy one at all. And he goes, "This would be a cup of a carpenter." And he goes and he drinks out of it, and that's the right one. And he saves his father. Elsa dies, but Brody, Indiana Jones, his father, and Sala make it out, and they ride off into the sunset. But right before then, we get to learn where Indy gets his name. He goes, or his dad, Sean Connery's character, goes, "We named a dog Indiana." And Sala starts laughing, goes, "You're named after the dog. And he laughs, and he takes off on his horse. And we show him riding off in the sunset, and that is Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. I've always loved this film since I've seen it back, and it holds up extremely well even now. My son was glued to the screen watching this. He asked all the right questions. The scene where they go to Berlin and they're burning books, my son asked me, he goes, "Why are those people burning books, Daddy?" And I explained to him a little bit on a level he can understand. And I didn't get into it too deep, but I said, Nazis weren't really good people, and they burned books to erase history. And so we got in that a little bit. So he asked all the right questions, but he was glued to the screen. He enjoyed it. I still like this film a lot. I loved it since I saw it as a kid. I would give Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade a 9.5 out of 10. And as a bonus, my rankings, I would go Raiders of the Lost Ark, Last Crusade, and then Temple of Doom. I love the first 3 movies, but The Last Crusade is a better film, in my opinion, than the Temple of Doom. So yeah, 9.5 out of 10 for me for Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. What are your thoughts on Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade? Leave a comment down below. Let me know. Where would you rank this in the Indiana Jones saga? Leave that comment down below. Hit the thumbs up. Hit the subscribe button. Share this video. I'd greatly appreciate it. You all stay safe out there. Take care of each other, and I'll be back soon. Thanks. Bye.